is recommended that to be respectful of others and protect the confidentiality, complaints against individual students, staff members, or board members, either named or unnamed, be presented in closed session or be put in writing, signed by the person or persons making the charges, and delivered to the Board of Education Secretary. At this time, I would like to ask you to sign the public participation sheet, and then each speaker may come to the podium and begin by speaking in the microphone, first stating your name and the topic that they will be addressing. Thank you.
I'm going to pull my mask down so you can hear me. Good evening, school board members and Dr. Dearman. My name is Jen Bando, and I'm the school counselor at Ridgeview Elementary School. I'm joined here this evening by my fellow counselors, Caitlin Thompson at Hickory Grove and Kate Mills at Demett Grade School. Our other two counselors couldn't be with us this evening, but they are with us in spirit. We wanted to share just a brief moment of your time to just introduce ourselves, share a little small snapshot of what it is that we do, and provide you a way to get in contact with us. So here's a very small explanation of how we support students here in Demett. We provide comprehensive social-emotional learning support for all students, kindergarten through 5th grade. We aim to equip students with academic readiness skills, career awareness, and personal social skills to become the most successful version of themselves. We do our best to create a program that is driven by school data, so each school looks a little bit different depending on needs. It's important to note that our biggest role is to advocate for all students, regardless of socioeconomic status, background, race, religion, home life, learning ability, etc. So as you can imagine, we deal with a wide array of issues. We deal with smaller issues such as study skills, organizational skills, making and keeping friends, learning to focus, set goals, to much larger issues such as students dealing with the loss of a parent or loved one, crippling anxiety that inhibits their participation in school, or even students suffering with suicidal ideation. It's a sad reality, but unfortunately we do have students who struggle with depression and severe mental health issues. Little kids doesn't always mean little problems. We also wanted to share something exciting that we are working towards this year as a team. We have begun the process of pursuing RAMP certification. This is a special distinguished certification through the American School Counseling Association. In fact, it's so distinguished that no other school counseling programs in the state of Illinois outside of Chicago have this certification. We strongly feel that our program is robust, proactive, and comprehensive and meets many of the qualifications for this certification. This year-long process is going to hopefully refine our program, make us more data-driven, and ultimately better support students. So last but not least, we wanted to extend an invitation to all of you to come and meet with us and learn more about what we do. Last February, we had a few board members come and meet with us so we could explain our role more in depth and answer any questions, and we'd like to offer that same invitation this year. So when I'm done speaking, these lovely ladies have a little card with a QR code on it. You can scan that code, and it's going to take you to a slide full of information about what we do. There's some specific content on there that we've created to deal with some of the bigger issues that we're dealing with. As you can imagine, we have many students suffering with high anxiety and feelings of isolation this year due to COVID-19, so we've created specific content to help those students. And there's also information on how you can get in contact with us. Please set up a time to meet with us. We would love to share more about what we do and share data and answer any questions. Thank you.
high school and middle school. Did anyone have any questions or comments about those particular suggested? Well, I thought we were going to have a list tonight, so I'm going to have to pull that up. Does anybody have it handy?
I just have a
You want to go?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Oh. I have it. Could somebody add this up, and how much does this come to? Each individual school going to have, or each individual level.
I did a tally, unless my figures are wrong. I added up those that are in the yellow, and then those that have already been done.
This is the original one.
This is what Dr. Levin sent us,
Okay.
and I tallied them all. Some of these that look like they were just pushing issues to the future. It's not savings, it just means we'll pay this year, we'll pay next year.
Right.
So I eliminated those. There were a lot of those, but there were some. My figures came up to about, the ones that have done about 609,000 is what mine. And then for the rest of them that were not done yet, that could be done, the total for those is about 55,000.
I guess my feeling is it's probably not enough. Probably not close to enough. And so I think we need to come up with other options. And I guess the question is, what process do we go through to come up with those options? Do we form a committee, or do we have this be the committee and ask the staff for suggestions, or what should be the process? Well, I think that process has already taken place, and I believe that there was a conversation between Tom Bellman and David regarding a few issues on how to look at and read and present the budget. But I think, the comment that he made was it's probably best that the administration come to us with various scenarios and ideas, and then as a board, we review those. For us to sit around and decide what we think is important, what we think is important, I mean, that's kind of preliminary. That's what the administration's job is, to recommend budgets and
slide right here paints a pretty clear picture. What we have here in gray is the extension in Ed Fund. That is the money that we are receiving through our property taxes. And the yellow line is the Ed Fund expenditures. Let's just start with the gray bars. I mean, graphically, you can see those were going up from 99 up until 2011, kind of flattened out, had another spike. But then, as you can see in the last 2 years, they're coming down from where they were with those Ed Fund expenditures, or excuse me, extensions. And then if you look at the yellow line, that's the Ed Fund expenditures. And what's interesting there, if you look at that, it's almost perfectly linear, a linear regression line on there. And you see some slight dips above, some dips below. But for the most part, perfectly linear. And again, this goes back 20 years. So the income expenditures that we're seeing are very consistent from year to year. If you look in the 2013, 14, 15 years, especially when you go from like 2011 to 12 to 13, you saw some increase in Ed Fund expenditures in comparison to the extensions that were going. I believe that's right around the last time that the board was presented a financial concern. And then you see that dip in yellow in the year 2015. That's when the last cuts were made. Now, Mrs. Disher made a comment last time that she said she thought we were already pretty lean. When those cuts were made, they have not been restored. Perfect example of Jeremy Eckman.
Some of them have.
Some, but his building was right around 500 students, I believe, at that time. He's now roughly at 800. But his budget hasn't changed since then. Those building budgets haven't changed. Some things have come back, but if you look at the expenditures in the yellow, they're almost perfectly consistent with that linear line. So I don't see that we have a huge spending problem. Yes, we can get better, and there are things that we can improve, and I plan to share some of those at the next meeting. But if you look at that red line, that's the telltale sign. There's the gap. Expenses aren't going to go down. They're going to continue to go up as they have clearly demonstrated for the last 20 years. However, EAV, again, no fault of anyone's, is going down, and that gap is only going to widen. That's where we have to address the issue of expenditures versus revenue. No one enjoys having these conversations, but the fact of the matter is we cannot continue down the path that we're on. We're going to have to make changes. Is this a crisis? I don't know if you can consider it a crisis or not, but certainly we cannot continue on the path. And some of the things that are forcing us off the path that we're on are not beyond our control. But out of a crisis can come innovation, and I think we've got an opportunity here to do some things that I think can put us back on a more financially stable path and also still meet the needs of our students.
Okay, so you're going to have some ideas for us, scenarios and different options at the October meeting.
I've got 4 for sure, and I've got a 5th I think I should be able to have. I know I'll have by the board meeting, the regular city board meeting.
And so by 4 or 5 scenarios, do you mean different options of how to reduce our expenses or different amounts to reduce or both?
It'll be both.
Okay.
I think to tackle this issue, we need to look at both fronts of this. You can't just look at the expenditure side, you can't just look at the revenue side. You have to look at both together because the two combined will contribute to our financial position. So it will address both.
What do you think is a reasonable amount to reduce our expenses by in the next year?
You know, Tom and I talked about that a little bit, Mr. Feldman. And I agree with him to try and bite off winning, $4.5 million in 1 year is going to be very difficult to do in one sit. This drought wasn't created in 1 year. It's not going to be solved in 1 year. I think we need to take a step-by-step approach and then evaluate
guess what I need to know is, we had a close to $5 million deficit this year, correct?
We haven't got a financial report.
Okay.
Well, that's what we're projecting.
That's what we're projecting.
That's for
Okay.
21.
That's not for
That's
next year, that's for this year.
For
For this
21,
year,
right.
right. So what is the projected deficit for next year, do you know?
That's what they presented last year.
Are you talking 22 or 21?
22.
He's talking 22.
We already know that 21
It's going to be
between-
almost 5.
is almost 5.
Right.
So the projected for 22 is what you're asking.
Yes.
I don't have for the year after.
Okay. I guess, from my standpoint, I don't think $1 million is enough.
And, right, I agree, and I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that's all I have to say.
You know, as we look at the numbers, and I think we need to set a target, like you said, we need to come back with you. We need to have different targets because we need to know what triggers to pull when, and if we need to, and we don't want to make knee-jerk decisions, right? We need to understand that. But in 21, we're going to be $4 million in a deficit in the education fund. Operating is going to be about the same. But based on the increases that we're going to see moving forward, the revenues aren't increasing anywhere near what those expenditures are. So as a board, I would think we need to set targets, and I agree completely that $1 million probably would, it can be one of those scenarios, but if we're $4 million today for 21 in the education fund, we're probably going to be what? Maybe close to 6 in 22? So we really need to take a look, and I'm going to pass these down to you, Karen. Those are just some charts I put together so you can see the numbers.
Really some very good visual.
But as you look, we're really trending, and you can see that on your charts, right? We're trending down, and it's into deficit, and it gets more, it increases every year, so we have to take a look at it, and the sooner the better.
Right. If we don't, the sooner we make the cuts, the fewer cuts we have to make later. And so even though it's painful, it's, better in the long run to make them sooner. Otherwise, we will have spent more and have to cut more.
Even more.
Yeah.
You made a comment that not much was added back. I just sat here and kind of wrote some things down since I've been on the board. When I first got on the board, they had made some significant cuts, and the budget was in very good condition. But some of the things that were added back, and I think we're all equally responsible in some of these, were library aides. I think we added some tech coaches. We returned the athletic budget back to what it had been before they cut it. Of course, lacrosse was added. Wrestling, I believe. Was there another assistant to the curriculum director that wasn't there before?
The middle
School concept, I think, was taken away and added. So I think those are some of the things, incrementally, little by little, that were added back. So, I don't know what the total cost would be of all of those, but I'm sure it was, enough to make a difference.
If you look at the PF funds, and this is the operating funds, the fund balances, again, on the AFRs. PF fund is the elephant in the room. And if you look at the ed fund non-personnel expenditures, take away salaries, benefits, and look at what's left, it's almost equivalent to what the deficit is. It's $4+ million.
Could you say that again? The non-personnel is $4 million?
A little over
And what percent, do you know what percentage that is about
of our budget.
of the education fund budget?
Well,
I was thinking it was 85%.
85%
Okay.
of your budget.
Yeah,
So then you have that 15% roughly left.
okay.
But of that, you can't eliminate everything. You can't eliminate purchase services, you can't eliminate Canvas, Power School, all these
Textbooks.
special education things, STAR testing.
Supplies,
We're gonna
we need to have.
these, So, we are pretty lean in that area. So the reality of the situation is, if we're looking at significant cuts, it's gonna come in the form of people.
And then when you think that's a.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Tom Feldman.
Sure, Tom.
Sorry. Yeah, Yeah, sorry about all my technical difficulties and everything else. But, you know, when I heard Dr. Dearman earlier talking about, you know, looking for a goal or a target, you know, something to hit. And then, you know, we talk about, and I did have that conversation with him about, you know, we're not going to be able to, you know, do this overnight. But, I mean, what if, you know, the goal was that, and he was on, you know, with $1 million, or suggested $1 million, and then a couple of you said, you know, $1 million's probably not going to cut it. I mean, what if the ask back to administration is, if you had to come up with a proposal or a suggestion to us that showed expense reduction for either $1 million, $1.5 million, or $2 million, I mean, what, as an administration, what would you suggest how we attack those if we were to give you, hey, you've got to cut $1 million, you've got to cut 1.5, or you've got to cut 2, and then maybe we can react to those items or proposals. And, you know, obviously a $2 million in 1 year, I mean, that would be fairly substantive, and I don't know that, you know, anyone wants to grab, you know, $2 million or, you know, 40% of the problem right away. But what if we just went at a, you know, give us a couple, 3 options in terms of, you know, if we were really to go after just $1 million, it would be this. But if we went after 1.5 or 2, then you'd be talking about these things.
I guess my concern is, Tom, if we only go after 1 or 1.5 or 2, we're still going to end up with a $4 million deficit next year. So that's, you know, $8 million in a couple years taken out of our reserves. And
yeah, and Karen, and I'm not suggesting just going with the 1 million.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I was playing.
Okay.
You know, the Dr. Dearman, you know, threw out as a, you know, hey, if it's $1 million, and, you know, a couple of you and Teresa, again, you got me at a disadvantage here, but I think it was a couple of you that said, you know, $1 million's probably not enough. I don't think $1 million's probably enough either, but I'm saying that it might help with the exercise or even administration if they were able, you know, then all of a sudden you know, like, what is in the absolutely, you know, we can, you know, kind of, you know, focus on these things versus, hey, we don't want to go here right now, but these are also on the table. I'm trying to give
I think you're,
I'm trying to give
Yeah.
options for them to think about and for us to think about. But I agree with you that, I just don't, you know, at some point, and you said it, Karen, that, I mean, savings now is savings later. So it's not even, you know, even if they came back with a 1 million, then there were some options that we liked out of the 1 million that we could pull from, and we could look at the 1.5 or the 2 million, but we got to start somewhere. And if we only focus on, well, it's got to be 1.8 million, and then we just get ourselves into paralysis over that's just such a big number, then that might be a limiting factor also. So I think we need to, you know, get into it somewhere, and if it's, you know, an option, if it's a bunch of options with varying amounts, then we can at least start clawing our way back out of this.
I'd like to refer to that.
yeah, I agree with the process. I just
chart.
disagree with the
Did you
numbers.
take it off?
I just make them
I'd
different
like to have that
numbers.
back if I could.
What would you make them?
Well, make
That gray and
them
yellow.
1.5.
chart.
I'd make them 2, 3,
don't-
and 4. I'd make them like 2, 3, and 4. But that's just what I would do. I don't know what other people would say.
Let me point this out. Dr. Dearman's putting that chart back up on the screen. The thing that worries me when he gets back up there is that yellow line has been very consistent on its way up. And that's not going to change.
Right. It's a structural deficit.
Yeah, unless, you know, we affect it somehow, but we know it's going to continue on that upward trajectory. The red line is the variable. It's gone down. It's gone down now below the yellow line, so we've got this crunch. If it continues to go down, that spread is going to get worse every year. If it at least flattens out, the differential won't be as great, but it will still be great. We can't really survive with millions of dollars of differential every year. So I think we need to do what we can until we know what we've got in perhaps 2 years from now, depending on what EAV does. But I think we have to anticipate that given what we all see out in that economy, it's not going to just reverse itself and take off again anytime soon. So what do we do to right-size ourselves in the meantime? And then if it does take off, we'll be in the pleasant position of being able to add things back in. Now, Dr. Dearman, you said you've got 4, maybe 5 items, and then you said you had mentioned the number of $1 million. Is that about the range of what you're thinking that these 4 or 5 items would hit?
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't even say they're options, because it's not like you have to choose option A, B, C, or D. These are going to be buckets.
Yeah.
You can take one bucket, or you can take all 5 buckets.
Okay.
And so it'll be a wide range of dollar amounts.
So these are big buckets.
Oh, okay. So do they add up to $1 million, or what are these buckets?
Could add up to multi-millions.
Oh, okay, okay,
They will add up
okay.
to multiple millions.
If we're doing that, though, we're going to be affecting people and programs, yes?
Yeah, that is true.
What I'd like to, in addition to finding our big buckets, I'm hoping that there are more, besides this, small buckets that we can add in, because every one of these small buckets, maybe we save another job or another program that otherwise we wouldn't. We
Right.
know historically we've been a very successful school district in every way, including financially. And we've been in a position where we can be very generous. Maybe if we honed back the generosity a little bit across a number of areas, we keep this program, we keep that program, we keep that teacher, we keep this teacher. So I know we have to look at the big buckets. It's just that simple. It's become clear to me. But I'd also like to see if we can't find some more small buckets too, with the hope of the bigger buckets not being so drastic. Okay? And I don't know what all those are. I haven't been on here long enough. I don't have enough information or knowledge about the operation of the school, so I'm a little bit at the mercy of the people who do know it well to say, hey, we've always done this, but we could do this, you know. We can live with it here instead of here for the time being. Maybe someday we can get back to here, but we can live with this here. I don't know. I wish I had more knowledge so I could sit here, but I think I have to leave it to the people who are the experts and have them tell us what some of those big and small options are. Okay?
Any other comments or contributions from the board this evening?
Well, I mean, I would like to look at the middle school concept, have that be one of the things we see, what the savings is for that. And then somebody had mentioned, you know, what kind of savings can you get if you reduce the number of hours that all the children have to be in school? You know, we have our children in school longer, right?
Well, yes.
Oh, we don't?
I thought isn't the state requirement 5 hours and we do 6?
Well, 5 hours to serve a lunch is the minimum to be counted as a school attendance day.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, are there some big things, you know, that we haven't looked at in the past that we should? I don't know. I mean, I hate that idea. I hate it. But, you know, I'm just saying, we have a lot of money that we have to save, and so I hope we're looking at, you know, a lot of different options.
Well, you're right. There's like I said, out of a crisis can't come innovation. If anything out of this pandemic, we've learned that in some of our own work environments. I think you're absolutely spot on, and there are some things that we can look at differently. And hopefully the board is open to that because some of these will be things that haven't been done before. But maybe needed to be done out of necessity.
There are many things we can look at, and you know, you hate to throw ideas out because you don't want to offend any one group, and you don't want to. But there are many things that we could do to be creative as well. I mean, I know our administrators have not received a raise this year. There are other things we can do to compensate them, maybe not monetarily, maybe with more personal time. You know, I know our administrators work very difficult year-round, many of them. And so, you know, I know as a superintendent myself or a principal, if someone would have offered me an extra week off as opposed to, you know, I would have been like very happy, but, you know, other people maybe not. But there are just many different things that we can think of. But I think Dr. Dearman hit the nail on the head. You know, it's administration 101. You reduce costs by either reducing personnel or closing facilities. And we're not there yet. We don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction, but we definitely need to get serious about this and figure out what some of those scenarios could be. Because I agree, if we don't start now, it's going to continue to grow. Now, property values, we may see an uptick. I don't know. I know many homes have sold, more even sold for higher than appraised value. And so, you know, maybe we'll see an uptick in that. I know there's some construction, not a lot. It's not feasible for many people. Costs of construction material have gone up. So it'd be interesting to see what the EAV does in the next couple of years. If by chance things do set themselves straight, I've never seen EAV so low for so long in my 34 years as an administrator. I mean, we had some dips, we had rises, but this has been like holding our breath. So hopefully we'll get some good news in the next 2 or 3 years, but we'll just have to see. In the meantime, we have work to do.
You know, Abby, I will say this. So I look at the Sunday paper like everybody else, and I see the volume of real estate transactions that are taking place, and that's fabulous, but it's not at the upper ends.
No,
it's
it's
at the
not.
lower ends.
It's not. I
and
mean,
the lower middle ends.
And our commercial properties, and you've seen the peak
Right.
ads on the last couple of boards.
Right.
That's right.
Commercial properties
Are going
taking
down.
a hit.
And they're protesting their taxes.
Right.
So
we'll
that
see what-
tax revenue is probably going to
The
go
end of
down.
this summer was a pleasant surprise to many. But many,
That'll be, what, 3
but-
years down the road?
well, and many realtors are saying, well, you know, don't get used to it. Take advantage of it now if you want to sell your home. There are many people looking for homes, but you're right, it hasn't been a huge increase in value. But there was a slight increase in value the last 2-3 months of summer when homes were on the market, so.
But Tom,
You know, back when those cuts were made in 2015, you look at what the circumstances were. The
Yeah.
EAD did not go down. It never went down. It didn't go as quickly, but it didn't go down. We have an EAD that is going down.
Right.
So that is a worse situation than what it was then.
Far worse.
And yes, something, I mean, the graphic clearly shows there were cuts made, some things were brought back, as you can see a little uptake on the line. But you have that situation. That's also at the same time, Dr. Humbles, I'm sure you remember, that's when Vision 2020 was really going, and they were moving to the evidence-based funding to get away from the CAS and the prorations. So there was actually a positive move in state funding. We don't have that. We've got the exact opposite. So we've got 2 more strikes against us that weren't happening at that time. So
And
it's
minimum-
unfortunate. It's not anything anybody's done wrong, but that is the reality of the situation.
And you throw into that minimum wage, the possibility of the state passing pensions back on to the school districts. I mean, it could just continue to be a struggling situation.
is that bump up there, is that when Hickory Grove was built too? Didn't we have to add teachers then? Does anybody know?
It was about that time. That was
Okay.
Jay Marino's project.
So I guess, the other thing, question,
There's the different times of it.
okay,
2010 was when Hickory Grove.
okay.
Well, that's when the referendum passed. I don't think the actual funding started until 2 or 3 years once it's passed and enacted. You can see that in the last. It was passed in 2010, but not, the payment didn't start until 2013. So some money was transferred out of the
So what will be the time frame? You'll present these at the next meeting in 2 weeks, and then what? When will we have to?
Let's go backward by design. When does this happen? What is our drop dead date? We
Yeah.
have to get this done. We're talking people, which we are. It has to be done, finalized, approved at the March meeting.
Okay.
The reason being, Carol, you have to give the 45 days notice. That's a legal requirement. You cannot fault us on that. So that means it's got to be information in February, the way this board has done business in the past. So those are the two ending dates. So I would suggest we look at what's presented in October. We've got November, December, we have 2 full months to have a committee meeting, whatever the board decides. Have committee meetings, committee of the whole, individual meetings, whatever we decide. At least 2 whole months, we can even go into January if we needed to finalize whatever the decision is going to be for the next year. Because we can't cut people this year. Contractually, we're obligated to have those people that happen after the pandemic. We didn't have a choice because of that 45-day law. So that's the end date. It's March of 2021. It has to be approved.
Dr. Dearman, in this process, are there things in here that we will have to sit down with the DEA and negotiate with them in order to implement some of these things?
When the finance committee met, that was one of the concerns brought forth with the DEA. Is the last time the cuts were made in 2015, they didn't feel included and didn't really have a say or any conversation in the matter. So that's part of the reason why we put that committee together. Dr. Humbles and Mrs. Holzhauser were in on that meeting as well and heard some of those things. So I think it would be good to have the stakeholders involved. Some of the ideas are going to impact them directly, and I'm not in the classroom. The principals, they're in the buildings, but they're not in the classroom. We need to look at, if we do this, what are the intended and unintended consequences? It would be nice to get that feedback. What could be expected if this is considered? Where is it?
I think it's always good to involve them. However, it needs to be a very serious conversation because the information that we receive, like you said, the small buckets, they need direction to know what it is we're expecting. And so what I would like to say is, okay, this is what we're expecting. We'd like it to be part of that conversation. But the targets probably won't change. And so, if there are going to be cuts made and they will be impacted by them, I think it's always best to involve them and let them be part of that. But we have to be very clear about our targets and our expectations.
More than just the question of voluntarily sitting down with the DEA, though, my question was, are there some things that will be required legally to be bargaining?
To
Having just been through that process, I know it takes time. And so if any of these things might be things that have to be negotiated with DEA, then we would have to back that time from
There's
those
nothing
meetings.
that I have considered that is in violation of the contract with the DEA.
Okay, all right. May I ask a question? This falls under the category that I learned long ago, but obviously I still haven't learned it, that if you, it's better to keep your mouth shut and let people think you're ignorant than to open your mouth and let them see that you're ignorant. Dr. Dearman, how much do we pay for our canvas? Do you have some ballpark how much we pay for canvas?
That would be better directed to our financial person, Mr. Hackett.
I would have to look that up for you.
Is it a substantial amount?
I want to say between 30 and 40.
Oh, okay, so it's not 250,000. I've been
And it's
told that
not
there's a
like-
Google operating program that does the same thing, and it's free, and other school districts use it. All right. If it does everything else, maybe we could save 38,000 if the other program does just as much, and that I don't know.
Have you heard about that?
Yeah, that was one of the options that the one committee considered, but due to the features and the whole intent of the one committee to provide, quick feedback to students, Canvas was more
Any other comments, questions, concerns before we move on?
I think we need to get back to Karen's point. What are our targets? Tom had said 1, 1.5, and 2, and Karen said 2, 3, and 4.
And to clarify that, Mike, because after Karen, spoke up, I mean, I think I was looking at, targets for, a year over year kind of. I mean, I know when Karen was saying, 2 and 3 and 4, I think when I was saying 1 and 1.5 and 2, I was just trying to get the ball rolling, number one. We've got to start somewhere. And number two, I think I was thinking an incremental, year over year. So, in the first year, maybe you get X, and then in the next year, you get an additional Y. And then in the year, after that, because if we all agree that we're not going to be able to get to it all in, overnight, then it might be something that we have to, go year by year and incrementally pick up additional reductions. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but I just want to make sure I wasn't totally not understanding I wasn't throwing $1 million out there thinking that's going to solve anything. I was just saying that we got to start somewhere. And again, if you go by a year over year and you add to it, increase, then you end up with maybe after 3 years at 1.5 or 2 million or whatever it is, then you've got your hands around this. Or if you go $1 million and then $1.5 million, that's 2.5, and then 2, I mean that's 4.5. After the 3 years. So I don't know if any of that's making sense to you guys, but that's kind of where I was going.
I understand what you're saying as far as a process in place, and you weren't being definitive about exactly what those numbers were. Now, Dr. Dearman, you said you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of ideas, and that could result in multiple reductions. So, should we wait to see what his ideas are before we
Can we look at them? When is the earliest we could look at them, and then maybe we can ask for
They'll be in the board packet in 2 weeks.
2 weeks? Okay.
So do you want to set the target now, or do you want to set the target after we see his?
Can we ask, can you give more information? Can you give us a range? What you're looking at, what type of range are we looking at? Or can you
How does,
provide that?
I'm sorry, Dr. Dearman, I know you're about to say something, but I don't know that do the items really affect what our target should be? I mean, if we know what the deficit is, and we know what we have to do, so, and I'm sure Dr. Dearman's items are significant and are of interest, but I don't know that those, I don't know which is the cart and which is the horse, but if we know what we got to be anyway, then I don't know that the items that he's currently contemplating, what they might add up to, necessarily change what our charge in terms of the target should be, if that makes sense.
I agree, but I guess my question is, I want to make sure that we're on the higher side, or we're going to come back to you and say, that's not enough. So I want to make sure we start big, where we need to be, and move forward as we should, so we don't have to rework and do that. So that's why my question came about.
Yep. One of the higher end buckets is $4.5 million a year.
One bucket by itself?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And
I don't want to get into details because I'm
Right, I
not
agree.
prepared to do that. I wasn't asked to prepare that for tonight. I
Right.
promise you I will have it at the October meeting, the regular meeting, 2 weeks. But there's a few things I'm still waiting on.
Okay.
And even some of the things that I'm not going to have a definitive, what's going to happen with the fair tax, I don't know.
There's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, what's going to happen is there going to be a federal bailout? I'm not real convinced of that. We all know our governor and our president butt heads. That's going to be dependent on the election and how that plays out. So some of those things we're not going to know for a while. But these things that I'll bring forward are concrete things for the board to consider that will address the budget deficit, not only in the coming year, but multiple years as well.
So Karen, it sounds like it wouldn't be what you
Yep, that's good.
By early November, we'll know about the fair tax. And then,
True.
And so, I think the parameters that I'm operating on, I don't know what anybody else is operating on, but we did nothing. We know what our shortfall is this year, is $5 million. If we do nothing, I'm expecting that normal diagonal yellow line probably puts it at $6 to $6.5 million shortfall. And we can't sustain that. Now, some of this has been caused by the economy. One of our major employers moving a healthy dose of their higher up executives out of the city. But some of this has been caused by COVID, and it's still with us, and it'll still be with us for a while. That to me is a clear emergency. We're in the fortunate position of having a good amount of reserves, and so we have those reserves for emergencies like this. And it's my opinion, the sense of this board is we don't intend to balance this budget on the back of cuts. We will intend to use some of our reserves. It's a question of how much we feel we can continue to erode that amount each year, given that our yellow line continues to go up. So it would be nice to just see what the options are and how draconian they would be, and there comes a point where we say we cannot do that and keep Dunlap School District at an A+ level, but we can do these things and stay A+.
I agree with you, Mike, completely. I know there will be some pain. I know it's not going to be easy, but it'll be interesting to see what you come back with next month. Sure. So do we have a consensus that we do want to pick a target at this point, or are you wanting to look,
Well,
wait and hear what?
Karen's already offered up 2, 3, and 4.
Does that seem fair to the rest of the board?
Which means probably we're funding the other $2.5 million out of reserves. Is the
Right.
board comfortable with that?
I would suggest you wait. I can tell you from, it'll be in the $1 million to $4.5 million range, pretty much every option, for the most part.
Well, that hits your target, Karen. So
Right.
Your target can be reached depending on what the board consensus is of the things that are presented, which are you willing or able to move forward with.
And we should know in October what our EAV will be for the next year?
Well, we've already got a projection, but
Oh.
they won't give us a hard number until spring.
Oh, okay.
The latest conversation we had, which was a week and a half ago, Mr. Hackett, 2.5.
Tom and Brian?
Negative to it?
Negative 2.5.
Negative. Dave,
negative 2.5 more.
And I forgot, each percentage, each point is it about 600,000? I can't remember what that figure is. Do you remember?
Depends on your EAV and your levy.
Right, but he can give you that. I mean, a good estimate. Okay.
I think that's correct.
And what was it?
I think
this
it's-
past year?
It was 2.
Negative.
So it's
Negative.
even more negative than.
Right.
And again, I think that's due to commercial properties more so than the residential market.
Then next year's is more. I think this year we're down $2 million in EAV, weren't we? And that was a 2% drop. So
Is
next
that
year,
right, Mr. Hackett? 2% this year, and we lost.
This year was 2.15.
Okay.
and next year we're projecting for 2.5. So it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse than $2 million.
The spread is just getting bigger.
I'll put it this way, they projected 2.5 last year as well.
Yeah.
And it was 2.15. I know that's not a huge difference, but it wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
They're
They
all-
usually try to be
They
I think
worse.
they're a little more,
Which makes you happy.
they like to try to project a
Makes you
little bit
laugh.
worse.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only 2.
All right then. Well, continuing even at what it was this year is still a problem, so.
Well, because it'll be even less.
And raises go every year.
Yeah,
You have a salary scale that not only goes
right.
over, but increases.
So our red line is not flattening out. It's continuing downward.
Spread's getting bigger.
Yes.
He did project after that year that it would flatten out, but again, who knows at that time, that's just a projection.
And even if it flattens, our expenses are still going up every year, so it doesn't help not much. I mean, it's better than being negative, I guess.
Okay, there are no other comments. This concludes the information discussion items. May I please have a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I move to adjourn to closed session for the following purposes as stated in the Open Meetings Act: the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, student disciplinary cases, collective negotiating matters, discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed, purchase of lease of real property, security procedures, and litigation.
Thank you, Mrs. Holthauser. Is there another second?
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Disharoon. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Holzhauser? Aye. Disharoon?
Aye.
Feldman?
Aye.
Henry?
Aye.
Humbles?
Aye.
Wagenbach?
I believe he's no longer on the phone.
Wisdom?
Aye.
Motion carries 6:59.
I'm not the most technological person. I'll tell you a funny story. I had to go to Oliver's last night.
Tom's going to be on Zoom as well.
We had
We'll
outside.
use the audio off of there.
Sorry, the Dominican.
He gave me the thumbs up, so he got it.
And it had this thing.
Yeah.
And I said, I said, what do I do with